He asked me every single day. Have you signed out yet? Have you changed groups? Are you leaving? Every morning, like he was counting down the days, like my absence was the one thing standing between him and happiness. And the thing is, I was going to leave. I had every reason to. I didn't even want to be in this group in the first place. But then I watched his face light up one too many times. And something shifted. I walked in that morning, looked him dead in the eye, smiled, and said 4 words that wiped that grin completely off his face. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed around, or made to feel like you don't belong somewhere, this one is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and stay with me, because this story doesn't involve lawyers or grand schemes or any kind of dramatic confrontation. It just involves one woman, one decision, and the single most satisfying smile you'll ever hear about: the military. And not the romanticized version you see in movies, not the sweeping landscapes and heroic montages. The real, unglamorous, grinding version. The one where you wake up before the sun, live in close quarters with people you didn't choose, and spend your days doing work that's physically and mentally exhausting. Our storyteller, let's call her Riley, has been assigned to a special training unit. 10 people, 1 room, 5 days a week for 2 months. Eat together, work together, breathe the same recycled air together. No personal space, no real privacy, just you and 9 other people navigating the same pressure cooker. Now, here's the first thing you need to know about Riley. She is the only woman in the group. Let that sit for a second. 10 people, 1 room, and she is the only woman. Anyone who has ever been the sole representative of their gender or their background or their identity in any high-pressure environment knows what that feels like. It's not just about being outnumbered. It's about the invisible weight of it. The constant, low-level awareness that you're being watched differently, judged by a different metric. That when you make a mistake, it doesn't just reflect on you, it gets quietly filed away as evidence about people like you. Riley was already navigating all of that, already proving herself in a space that wasn't built with her in mind, already doing the quiet, exhausting work of showing up, performing, and refusing to crack. And then there was Marcus. We'll call him Marcus, because every story needs a name for the antagonist, and his behavior deserves to be specific. Marcus was one of her 9 fellow group members, and from almost the very first day, before he had any real evidence, before they had barely exchanged 10 words, Marcus decided he didn't like Riley. Not a slow burn, not a gradual falling out, an immediate, deliberate, barely concealed hostility that had no logical origin point. He'd been in the group for 1 week when the pattern became impossible to ignore. Sharp comments about her work, not constructive, not professional, just cutting. Little dismissals. The kind of remarks that are designed to make you question yourself, to make you smaller, to remind you that someone in the room has already decided you don't measure up. "Are you sure about that?" said with just enough edge to sting. "That's not how we do things here," directed specifically at her, in front of everyone. Looks exchanged with others that she was clearly meant to notice. A low-grade, persistent campaign of disrespect that never quite crossed a line, never gave her anything solid enough to formally report, but was absolutely, unmistakably real. And the worst part? She'd been nothing but kind to him. Every single interaction, Riley had met his hostility with professionalism, with patience, with the kind of grace that takes real emotional effort to maintain when someone is being openly cruel to you. She didn't snap back, didn't match his energy, didn't let him see her rattled. Inside, though, that's a different story. Because here's what Marcus didn't understand. What people like him never quite grasp is that being professionally composed is not the same as being unbothered. Riley felt every comment, every dismissal, every pointed look. She just chose, deliberately and daily, not to hand him the reaction he was clearly fishing for. But the question nagging at her, the one that buzzed quietly in the back of her mind during work, during meals, during the stretched-out silence of the barracks at night, was why? Why her? What had she actually done? 1 week. They had known each other for 1 week. There was no history here, no old grudge, no competition over something real. There was just her, and his reaction to her. And the more she sat with it, the more one answer kept surfacing. He didn't like that she was there. Not her specifically, just the fact of her. A woman, in his space, in his group, doing the same job, standing in the same room. There's a specific brand of contempt that doesn't need a reason. It just needs a target. And Riley, as the only woman in the unit, had been handed that role before she ever opened her mouth. That realization didn't make her angrier, actually. It made her tired. The deep, bone-level exhaustion of recognizing a battle that has nothing to do with anything you did, and knowing you're going to have to fight it anyway. Here's where things get interesting. Riley had actually been considering leaving the group before any of this escalated. The work wasn't something she'd chosen. It had been assigned. And when the opportunity arose to request a transfer to a different unit, she started genuinely weighing her options. She mentioned it, casually, in passing. And Marcus, who had been watching her like a hawk since day one, completely lit up. Not subtly, not professionally, lit up. A visible, barely contained excitement that was almost embarrassing to witness. Like someone who'd been waiting for a bus for hours and finally saw the headlights coming around the corner. He started asking her about it, once that day, then twice, then multiple times. Have you signed out yet? Did you talk to the supervisor? Are you leaving this week or next week? Every morning, like clockwork. Every time with that same poorly disguised eagerness buzzing under the surface. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He wanted her gone. He wanted it badly enough that he couldn't hold the wanting in. And every time he asked, Riley felt something complicated happen in her chest. Part of it was the familiar sting, the reminder that someone in her immediate world was actively rooting against her. But underneath that, underneath the tiredness and the frustration, something else was starting to simmer. She watched him ask again one morning, watched the way he leaned forward slightly when he did it, the way his eyes had that hopeful little flicker, and a thought arrived in her mind, quiet and clear and almost amused. What if I just didn't? She hadn't made a final decision yet. She'd been leaning toward leaving, logistics, preference, the appeal of a fresh start somewhere without Marcus in it. All reasonable reasons. But reasonable reasons had nothing on the look on his face when he asked her that question. She started thinking about it differently. Not as, should I stay, but as, what would staying actually mean? She wasn't chained to leaving. The transfer wasn't finalized. She still had a choice. And the choice started to look very interesting. Because here was Marcus, checking in daily like her departure was something he'd personally ordered and was just waiting for delivery. Here was a man who had decided, from almost nothing, that she didn't belong, and was now so confident in his little campaign that he couldn't even bother to hide his excitement. What happens when you're that confident and then you're wrong? Riley turned that question over for a day. 2 days. Quietly. A small smile working at the corner of her mouth when no one was looking. She thought about every dismissive comment, every pointed look, every morning check-in delivered with that barely masked glee. She thought about the exhaustion of being the only woman in the room. And she thought about what it would feel like, just once, to hand none of that back to him, to give him nothing, and watch what happened to his face. Riley was already at her station when Marcus made his approach. Same as always, same routine, same question, wearing the same expression it had worn every day for the past week. So, Have you signed out yet? He was already half smiling, already anticipating, already tasting the answer he'd convinced himself was coming. Riley looked up. She held his gaze for just a moment, long enough to make it deliberate, short enough to stay casual. And then she smiled. Easy, unbothered, almost warm. Actually, she said, I'm staying in this group. Then she looked back down at her work. The silence that followed was spectacular. She didn't need to look up again to feel it. The specific, suffocating quality of a person who has just had an entire narrative they'd built yanked out from under them. The stunned recalibration happening in real time. The complete absence of anything to say. She didn't gloat, didn't explain, didn't give him a speech or a satisfied smirk or any of the dramatic punctuation he might have expected. She just went on with her work. And that, more than anything, was the point. Because the message wasn't, I beat you. The message was, you were never the one deciding. Riley didn't stay to win. She stayed to remind herself, and him, that she was never required to leave in the first place, that his contempt was never a verdict, that the people who want you gone the most are often the clearest sign that you belong exactly where you are. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't a grand gesture. It's just a smile, and 4 words, and getting back to work. If this story gave you that warm, deeply satisfying feeling in your chest, you know the one. Go ahead and smash that like button. It truly helps this channel more than you know. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever stayed somewhere or done something purely because someone wanted you not to? Tell me about it below. Subscribe if you're new. We're here every week with stories about ordinary people doing extraordinarily satisfying things. Until next time, don't leave. Especially when they want you to.